Welcome, everyone, to today's discussion, Can Agentic AI Really Transform Your Customer Experience? Where we're going to be cutting through the noise and discovering how these emerging technologies can or can't transform your customer experience. Now, joining me today are two great speakers. First up, we've got Henry Iversen. He's CCO and co-founder of Boost AI. Henry, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. And we've also got Ramtin. Matin. He's VP of Innovation and Partnerships at SpareBank Sør-Norge. That's the third largest bank in Norway. And Ramtin, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for the invite.
Now, before we get started, could I have each of you to introduce yourselves in maybe 30 seconds to the audience? Just tell them a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do at your respective companies. And Henry, could I start with you?
Yeah, of course. So I'm one of the founders in Boost. So I started the company back in 2016 with two of my friends. So I've been working pretty heavily on the tech side, but also helping a lot out on the commercial in terms of helping customers basically to make the most out of this technology. So definitely making sure that they are kind of leveraging the best of breed in terms of technology, but also then transforming their customer experience at the company.
Wonderful. And Ramtin?
So in my role, I have the responsibility to look into the future and see how we can improve the bank's performance by using technology trends or customer trends and try to capture that into the operating model of the bank.
Excellent. Glad you're both here. It's going to be a really good discussion today. Now, I've got a couple of notes here I want to start with as we sort of define agentic AI for those people that are watching that are not familiar with it. In essence, for those of you that are new to this, agentic AI is going to rework how you get work done. You think of it as maybe automating a process or a workflow within your organization. It accesses data, maybe one or more applications. And the idea is to take an intent as part of the customer experience or some other part of operations and turn it into a business outcome. Now, Henry, I think maybe I'll just start with you. And agentic AI and AI agents, they're getting a lot of hype. And I'm thinking maybe we should first off maybe define it in practical terms. I've given kind of a business level sort of, definition, if you will, but maybe you could define it in practical terms and then also talk about what makes this different from, let's say, virtual agents or chatbots and the like.
Yeah. So obviously we had chatbot and virtual agent for many years. Again, to some kind of varying degree on how well they're able to understand the question, but also how they're able to actually execute tasks on behalf of the user. And I think kind of now going into more the agentic age, you are definitely seeing kind of agents, AI agents being more capable of kind of doing this end-to-end automation that you could do before. So I think that's obviously a big part of it. Then you also have the level of like, can it do this autonomously? I think that's a key thing here, though. So you don't necessarily need to give it all a rigid kind of explanation on how to solve this problem for the customer. You actually give it kind of more freer instructions, basically. And then you can allow the AI agents to kind of go in and execute tasks on behalf of the user. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now, being, again, the big difference in terms of agentic AI. But I also think it's super important to be clear that most organizations, especially within the regulated industries, are not really ready to go fully agentic, if you can call it fully agentic, basically meaning it's fully autonomous. Because again, there is a lot of cases, a lot of questions. You want to make sure that you are kind of locked down. You want to have control. Some questions around like, how do I get financial advice is something you don't want the agentic AI to do alone. You definitely want to make sure the human are still in the loop. I think kind of what we are definitely seeing mostly today is kind of the emergence of the hybrid approach, where you define the level of agentic AI-ness in the solution, and then you can also benefit for some of the more predefined technologies, which we had for many years. So I think the combination of those are definitely kind of the way to go, especially for organizations in regulated industries.
Wonderful. I've got a couple of industry stats here that sort of paint a picture of the use and the intended use of agentic AI that I want to cover here for those of you in the audience watching. First is 71% of executives say that AI agents are going to drive higher levels of automation in their workflows, and 52% of them say they plan to use AI agents, in 2025. So this paints a picture for those of you watching that in order to remain competitive within your own industries, that the use of AI agents is probably something you're going to be needing to take advantage of, just remain competitive in the places where AI agents can actually be useful. And then also, this is an interesting stat that, Henry, I want to ask you about to see if you're seeing the same levels of growth. But this is, there's 3 times the agentic automation market growth in 2025 and we're only a little bit into 2025 at some point today, but then 2024. So are you seeing the same levels of growth and interest by customers?
Yeah, so I think when we started the company back in 2016, we saw immense interest around this technology, but I think you can probably 50x it today. This is basically on the focus and priority for every organizations out there. So if you're a big enterprise, but also a lot of small organizations are definitely looking into how they can be more efficient using AI, agent technology. But I think just to add to that, like again, a lot of the focus has definitely been around kind of the promise of having more cost savings, reducing the number of FTEs and so on. But I think really the value of this technology is also kind of how can you really transform the experience? How can you make sure you have a closer relationship with your customers at scale? So I think this AI technology will not only talk about like cost savings, which I know is kind of running a lot of the headlines right now. I think you're going to see kind of new ways of using AI to engage customers at a completely different level than you do today. And that's something we kind of basically just scratch the surface of.
And Ramtin, is your business's use of agentic AI, is it following similar timelines to what we're seeing with the industry stats? Are you ahead of the curve? What's going on at SpareBank?
So I would say we're quite on par with the curve as it is right now. As Henry mentioned, we have been using chatbots and AI agents for some time now, and we've mainly been using it for increasing efficiency throughout the organization, and we're kind of seeing. You're kind of talking into an era where we are transitioning to agentic AI. We see it more as an evolution towards agentic AI, because it's a natural step in the next era where we're going to use this type of technology to leverage even further effectiveness within the organization. What we see with the agentic AI is that it's, as Henry is also pointing out, that we can interact with the customer in a far different way than we've been able to previously, and that will enable us to also drive profit. And that has been quite complex earlier on in order to do that, because it's far more, at least in the banking industry, far more easier to drive initiatives where try to become more effective. But when you try to drive profit using this type of technology, you're kind of hitting a wall of regulations, because we're a heavily regulated industry and we need to take that into account. But when we use agentic AI, I believe that it will become easier over time, but we need to do this obviously in a responsible and ethical way.
Wonderful. Now, there's a bit of projections on Gartner's part. They're saying by 2028, the following two stats, this is their projections, at least 15% of day-to-day decisions will be made autonomously through agentic AI, up from 0% last year. And then 33% of enterprise software applications will include agentic AI to some degree. So there's a promise of this even being used even more, which is why we really want to have this conversation today. And Ramtin, I wanted to go back to you. You kind of talked a little bit about you're delving into the sort of, we're using it, and this is sort of what we've seen as the result. You've already done some heavily invested projects in virtual agents and got some good results. Can you talk about what those results look like, what the business impact has been? You talked about profit, so maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. And then there's sort of a follow-up half question that I have here about, is it worth for those in our audience to consider a transition to agentic AI, or is this an iteration of what you already have in place? What was the process like, and what do the results look like?
So when we first started using virtual agents, we wanted to become more present for our customers. So the idea is that when you have problems using the mobile banking solution, or you want to send in a mortgage request or something like that, you might encounter some problems or some questions. And we wanted to be able to be available for our customers 24/7, and also try to get rid of the repeating questions that a lot of our employees are facing, answering questions on the phone or answering questions on chat. So virtual agents kind of enabled us to go in that direction, and we have actually achieved reducing the FTEs with almost 30 people. So if we were to shut off all virtual agents today, we would need to hire 30 people in order to do that same type of work. So what does it actually give us? Obviously, there's the cost of it, reducing the OPEX, but also the quality of work, because we all know that doing the repetitive work all the time, it kind of reduces the quality of work. So we want to try to make a good environment for our employees, and they're able to do much more complicated work and be present for the customer rather than answering the same questions again and again. So in that sense, it's not only about money; it's also about taking care of the employees, and it's quite natural because we talk about transition, but again, we see it more as an evolution going in that direction, because it really makes sense in order to provide the agentic perspective to the different parts of our organization as well.
You reminded me of, there's an interesting aspect of the stuff you're talking about, replacing the 30 employees. If you had 30 employees, Agentic AI probably is also giving the customers a far more predictable experience, because in essence, I'm going to call it like every agent, it's the same agent, but every agent that's talking to, let's say, 50 different customers, all those agents know the exact same amount of information. They know the exact same answers, so to speak, as opposed to 30 people where someone's like, I don't know the answer to that question. Let me go check, and that kind of thing. So you're creating a predictable experience for the customer, and predictability breeds profitability. So it sounds like that's been part of the experience that you've had then. I mean, obviously I'm adding a very specific dynamic into this conversation, but does that sound accurate?
No, I believe you are absolutely right, Nate, because we as humans, we're only that consistent, because we get tired, we get fatigued, and so on. But these virtual agents, they perform, and they can have tens of thousands of conversation going on at the same time. And it's the same thing with the agentic perspective as well. They'll be able to have several tasks running at the same time, making us far more effective. And we've seen results of our employees becoming 82 minutes more effective per week. And this is a huge effectivity increase for our employees. And if we're able to do that across all the different subject matters that we have, we're in for a cool ride.
That's quite a bit of a productivity boost. Henry, let me ask you something here. Because we've had hearing Ramtin's sort of evolution from chatbots to agentic AI. Some people might think this is more of like a rebranding exercise, because certainly the term AI has been thrown around for everything, and now every vendor's like, and we have AI, and that means whatever it means. It could be a lot of just marketecture, but at the same time, we could be in the midst of really more of an AI revolution, because of just the strides that are being taken at a very rapid pace. So what's your view? There's sort of two ends of the spectrum here. Where are we, and how does this agentic AI fit into that?
Yeah, so first of all, to clarify, like obviously chatbot and virtual agents are still kind of a way how most people define it, though. I think obviously now AI agents are kind of being probably the new cool kid in the class in terms of terminology. So I think we are definitely going to see people using that word a bit more going forward, together with agentic AI. But it's still basically the same thing. But I think obviously when they go into virtual agent, but also now agentic AI with AI agents, they're going to be a bit kind of smarter and more capable on doing end-to-end automation by themselves. I think that's a big thing. But I also think the reality is that we are to some degree maybe selling the dream now more what is actually possible for some organizations, because like as you said, if you go to any conference now, you're going to see a lot of these buzzwords being very kind of front and center in their marketing. And I think that's kind of like end of the day, we can call it technology, what we deliver, whatever we want. But I think how we kind of approach it, the boost, is that we want to focus on kind of what is the real business outcome, what do we really want to achieve here. And then in order to achieve different transformation within the customer experience, to do cost savings, to generate more revenue, we obviously know that we need different technologies to be able to solve that task. I think for me, that is kind of the main focus. Should always be how do you actually create a business outcome, and I think also Ramtin agree on that point. But I think still, if you look at just in general, especially when it comes to large language models and generative AI, those have definitely enabled a much more human-like conversation, which we have never seen before. So I think they definitely enable just a different way to interact with these agents, which means that you can also have more stuff being done to them. They can do more stuff on your behalf. And I think what we will see over time as well is just a bit more one-to-one kind of really kind of understanding, like I'm a customer within this bank and I know Henry and he is married and he has 3 kids and I know his preferences and all these things. When you kind of really get access to that information, you're looking at a very powerful experience, which I think is going to be really hard to have one-to-one by using humans. So I think to your point, like, yes, it's definitely a rebranding exercise for some, but I think there's also a lot of kind of reality into it. But I think maybe the big challenge for some buyers out there is also kind of being able to recognize what is real stuff and then what is kind of more on the marketing side. So that's probably going to be some of the challenges I think people are going to encounter going into this year.
Ramtin, I'm actually wondering, kind of on the same vein of thinking here. The underlying question is, how should organizations be thinking about agentic AI on that spectrum? You know, is it a rebranding exercise? Is it an evolution? And I was thinking about maybe a way to try to formulate this, and this puts you a little bit on the spot, but I hope you've got a good answer for it. Is you've painted a picture of what it looks like with very tangible outcomes for your business, replacing 30 people, that sort of thing, with agentic AI. How did that differ when you were using, let's say, just some kind of chat bot? And how is it different for the organization? And that maybe can help those watching gain a better sense of, maybe I should be looking at this, or no, I'm kind of good with what I have and I'll wait till this evolves a little more, or whatever the case is. What's your thought there in terms of what you've seen at the organization for chatbots versus agentic AI?
I like you put me on the spot because it makes it much more fun. So, pointing back to what Henry basically said, it's about business outcomes, right? We don't do agentic AI, we don't do virtual agents, we don't do generative AI or RPA or whatever technology we introduce into the company. We don't do it for the sake of the technology. We're doing it because we want to better our performance in some way, whether that be profit or whether that be cost. We do it because it is basically a tool we have in our toolbox to solve a certain problem. Now, technology is not always the solution to a business problem, but in today's modern age, it has some. It is usually serves as a enablement to do that. So when it comes to using, calling agentic AI a rebranding or whatnot, I'm not so concerned with that. I see it more as a tool in the toolbox I have, where I need, if I encounter a problem, business problem, I can look at agentic AI and see, all right, this actually fits as part of the solution in order to implement that within the organization. Now, agentic AI this is not going to be a definition that you could put but this is basically for me a way of having generative AI in the bottom, but having a new front end which serves the purpose of the guy or girl who is actually using the technology. So it's not that different from what we have seen before. So some could argue that it might be a rebranding exercise, but I see it more as a vision of going into a certain direction in order to solve some of the future's business problems that we might encounter.
And I also want to add that the fact is also that you don't want to use kind of the most advanced technology for everything. There's a lot of questions. I know Ramtin has his business, which is pretty simple stuff. Like, you don't want to use generative AI just for sake of it. So I think, again, when we talk about this agentic AI, I think we also need to keep in mind that sometimes, like, a simple question in a contact center could be solved by very simple technology. Because, again, on the other side, with more autonomous approach, you will lose some control. That's just part of it. And you will also then have higher cost in terms of kind of utilizing this technology, because it's kind of, you have token cost you need to pay as well. So it's also about kind of, again, finding the right tool for the job I think is extremely important. So I think the hybrid approach, where you kind of utilize many different technologies to solve a task, is definitely the way to go.
Maybe I can comment on a actual example on that, if that's okay, Nick.
Please.
So internally, we use generative AI in order to make our searches more effective and try to support our employees in finding information quicker, and also solving questions when it comes to how to basically do banking stuff. But moving that into a customer-facing solution, the risk increases quite much. And this is basically the guidelines that Henry is kind of speaking of, because combining generative possibilities with guidelines is at this point the way to go. And I also believe that is the way to go for agentic AI within the next months, maybe future years, when deploying that towards the customers. And I kind of like that we have these nuances when it comes to implementing the technology, because yeah, generative AI is extremely powerful, and as I say, we use it internally. But I would never just deploy it customer facing at this point without having some type of guardrails. That is, we need to take into account the regulations and also the GDPR law that is here present in Norway.
What I love about this conversation from both of you is this is very much almost a business conversation first, which is really important because I've been in tech for 30 years and I've seen time and time again those anywhere in the IT stack, kind of getting really excited about a technology, and they start with the technology and they work like backwards to the business problem, when both of you have made it very clear, no. Start with the business problem and figure out what technology is actually going to meet the needs. That's actually really, it's encouraging to hear that from both of you. And it's very, very good sage advice. Henry, if a company wants to get started with AI and customer service, what's the recommendation you have for them to start down that path?
I think there's definitely a few considerations you want to make. Is again, first, just like, do you want to kind of build it yourself, which is obviously going to be pretty a daunting task. We are definitely seeing that as kind of a way to go. But I think, again, why, like, I don't know, Ramtin has been kind of working with it, building their own generative AI bot internally, because obviously you can build some experience. I think when you kind of buy it from a platform like Boost, you obviously kind of get all the necessary kind of functionalities included. So I think it's just about like, how do you make sure that you kind of get all the needed functionalities in one package? And also think about like who is actually going to own the project, because I think if you want to build it yourself, you're going to need a lot of developers, a lot of data scientists, and so on. And I think that direction is maybe, let's say, possible or feasible for some organizations. But I think most of the one we work with, obviously, there's so many AI problems to be solved in an organization nowadays. There's so many AI problems. So normally all the developers and the data scientists are pretty much kind of occupied on other stuff. So again, that's the reason we kind of been focused more on kind of making a platform for business users. So we take people from the customer service teams. So the 30 people Ramtin talked about, those people will be normally the people being trained in actually using the solution. So you create the superior experience from the people actually with experience on it. I think that's one of the first considerations you need to make. It's just like who is going to own the project internally. And then you kind of need to just kind of go out in the market, really understand kind of what is real and what is not real. And I think you can obviously always look at a lot of fancy slides, a lot of kind of high level messaging. But I think at the end of the day, you really need to kind of sit down and be a bit practical and test it out yourself. And then also talk to references. Because again, separating kind of the marketing fluff from the real case studies, as Ramtin is obviously representing, that's two very different things though. So at least that's kind of very high level, a good starting point though to get started. And then also find a partner which can help you and support you in that journey, as we also do with our customers. Because again, to your point, this is more than only technology. You also need to find a partner which can help you on that journey, because it's going to be a long journey with a lot of exciting development. So building something within 1 week is not really, as a possible. You are going to build on this project for many, many years to come.
And Ramtin, what does success look like from your perspective? Just maybe you could paint a picture for the audience as they're thinking about, we want to get something like this implemented. How do they know they've succeeded?
Well, I believe tracking your development over time. Obviously, when we implemented virtual agents at first, I'm looking at the date. It's like almost 10 years ago. It's kind of scary how fast time goes. But we were quite sure that we were not going to get it right the first time, because this has also something to do with the maturity of the customers using it. It doesn't matter if you introduce some fancy technology if your customers aren't able to use it. And I would say that when we implemented this almost 10 years ago, we were quite ahead of the curve. It took time for people to understand does virtual agents actually work? How do I ask the question? What is the difference between virtual agents and doing a search on Google? Because a lot of people are not that digitally mature in using this type of technology. And we need to keep that into account as well. There's a difference between someone being 20 years old and someone being 70 years old. They don't necessarily digest the technology in the same way. So we quite quickly established feedback loops together with Henry and them in order to understand what is the feedback of the customers. Do they like it? Do they hate it? What can we do to improve? And this journey is something you need to take into account that you have to do with the customer. So we were quite open in order to understand what is the solution rate, as how many of the questions are we actually able to solve, but also the customer satisfaction going forward. So I think it's important in order to achieve success that you define what metrics you're going to measure on and have an open mind in order to understand and adjust your path going forward. Because I can tell you, you're not going to get it right the first time, and that's okay. But you need to understand that you need to adjust going forward. And this is where the competency that we've had with our partner has been quite good. But also understanding that you will never get a one-stop shop for everything. When it comes to agentic AI or even generative AI, you will have different solutions doing different stuff. It's like you don't take a hammer to cut a wooden board. You need to understand what type of business problem you want to solve. And this is where the different vendors and different partners have different attributes. And that is quite important to understand what is it actually you want to solve, what is you want to achieve, and pick the partner based on that, because that's you're gonna hit the ground running if you do that in a proper way.
I have two last questions one for each of you, and they're sort of both forward-looking. Helps kind of paint a picture for the audience a little bit. And Ramtin, I'm actually going to start with you. I'm going to kind of continue on what you were talking about a little bit here, because you talked about the customer experience, being so vital here. Looking ahead, how do you see the experience for your customers at your bank changing over time in the future?
So we hope, in order to improve the customer experience, in forms of making it frictionless to be a customer at our bank. Although we like to talk to our customers, it's not maybe it's not that way for the customer, that they want to talk to us. But when they do, we want to do it in a fashion where they get their problem solved immediately, whether that be financing, technical problems, or what that might be. And also we hope to be able to serve agentic capabilities going forward, so we can reduce friction over time, and also solve their problems going forward. Because we all know when you're in a state where you need the bank for whatever purpose it is, you want them to be present. You need them to understand what you're doing, and you need to be able to serve the products that you need in a quick and secure way. And that is basically what we're about: being present when the customer needs us. And if we can use agentic AI to do so, of course, that will be a tool to implement.
Excellent. And Henry, from your perspective, forward looking, what's the next frontier in this space? How do you see the future evolving for agentic AI?
This is certainly an exciting space to be part of. Obviously, things are changing pretty rapidly in our industry. So I think there is definitely going to be things we are going to see kind of maybe a slower development on, which we already see in the last couple of years. And then I think that's just around kind of being able to be connecting kind of to the wider ecosystem, because I think a lot of the intelligence you find in these solutions definitely requires like you being able to go into core banking system, going into CRM systems, and so on. Those things will gradually, I think, grow more and more around. But I think kind of maybe the more, say for me, the defining moments in this space is kind of, which we're already starting to see, is the consolidation of different channels. We are going to see big changes in how we kind of enter a web page, for example, UI, which are now very static. We can obviously become much more dynamic. We also see now a big emergence around not only being available in the, say, messaging or chat channel, but also being available in the voice, because obviously voice models has been developed a lot, especially now with generative AI capabilities. So you are definitely able to have a very intelligent conversation by using your phone, where you obviously in the past had these more like traditional IVR menus, which obviously no one liked. So those things have definitely changed a lot. So I think just kind of being like available when you need it in the kind of the preferred channel is definitely the way to go. And then again, as a result, you're going to see consolidation of channels, because I also think it's a tip to organizations to not try to be too spread out, because I think the more channels you have available for customers, less investment you can do in that specific channel. So it's also about thinking like, how do we actually reach out to customers? And I know, for example, Ramtin and SpareBank, they have a big presence around the mobile bank. A lot of people are kind of logging into the mobile bank pretty frequently. So that's obviously a great opportunity to engage with your customers at scale, when you have the information about them to drive the conversation. So a lot of stuff going to happen, I think, in the coming time. But I think, again, it all kind of ends with the experience and how people actually interact with the technology. That's a big win.
Wonderful painting the pictures from both of you of what the future is going to look like here. That's all the time that we have left for today. Henry, Ramtin, thank you both for sharing your knowledge and experience today. A bunch of insights. I think it was really good conversation here. For those of you watching, if you'd like to learn more, you can visit boost.ai/contact. And this is going to conclude today's discussion. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.